Thank you all so much for coming. Great to have everyone here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Matthew Jarron. I'm the museum curator here at the university, and we're delighted to be hosting this fantastic exhibition of the work of Sidney Jordan. I'm not going to really say anything tonight because we have various other people to speak to you. First of all, I'm going to introduce Professor Chris Murray, our Professor of Comics, to kick us off.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for coming to this launch of this, I think it'll be wonderful exhibition of the art of Sidney Jordan. I just want to say a few words of thanks. I'm not going to say too much, don't worry. But of course, our thanks are due to Sidney, and we're so pleased that Sidney could come and join us here. And we're so honoured to be hosting this exhibition of this wonderful artwork. And of course, we also owe great thanks to Alastair for the donation of this artwork for this exhibition, and of course to Matthew for pulling it all together. In terms of the work itself that you're seeing here, this is several pieces covering Sidney's remarkable career. And of course, Sidney was born in Dundee, and I found out only recently we went to the same school. We're both attended Rockwell School, which is a really nice connection. But I think I've always had a huge appreciation for Sidney's artwork, and also have been fascinated, of course. Knowing that you're from Dundee has always been a kind of special connection. But I'm sure, as you can see, the artwork on display here is incredibly detailed, incredibly well designed, and the stories are fantastic. If you haven't encountered the stories here, and Jeff Hawke in particular, I think there's a lot to discover here. So we're really pleased to be able to host this exhibition of this fantastic artwork. By a Dundee based born artist, and also a boy from Rocky. So two boys from Rocky made it. I think that's the thing that I want to get.
Well, the rest,
yeah. Well, I kind of made it. You certainly made it. Cool. So thank you very much, and thank you, Alastair, and thank you, Sidney.
Thank you. Call Alastair Hunter, who's kindly lent most of what you see here, to just say a few words as well.
Well, it's been a great pleasure collecting this stuff, and I just wanted people to see it. So how this came about, well, I've been very fortunate to collect all these, and I think it's really nice. They've got sequences here, and in some cases I've got whole stories, and I would have loved to have had it upstairs where somebody could see an entire story.
Which is like cover every wall.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I literally could actually, but I know there are probably not that many people who want to stand there and read every page. But when you see these, I was absolutely blown away when I actually saw. Well, I collect original artwork, and when you see that, and then you see the Daily Express pages, which are so minute, and you kind of toss away in the bin the next day, it's just, I think it's just marvellous stuff. So this, of course, these are the 1950s, these are the earliest pages I've got. I think we're very privileged to have Sidney here because, well, there are not many of them left, and they were real masters, and they're quite unappreciated, I think. So I think Chris, put it right. It is very splendid to be able to see it. So how this came about was another dealer friend produces this magazine. And he said to me, one day I went in and he said, I really want to include Sidney in one of my magazines. And he said, look, everybody's too busy to write it, so Alastair, you're going to write it. Well, I did start it, but I didn't write it in the end. But when it was going to be 4 artists, so one of the chaps here is Jim Holdaway's Modesty Blaze, who amazingly was in the same building as Sydney, working for the Express newspapers. And Sydney's written a lovely introduction for that section. When they saw the artwork, they were absolutely staggered. And so basically this became a Sydney book. And it's got a lot of this stuff, so if anybody's interested, I've got a few copies, and we've got Sydney here who'd sign it. Anyway, really the chap you want to hear is Sydney, so
we all fall asleep.
I'm going to hand you over.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, by the way, Dundee, for putting this up.
Over to you, Sydney.
Well, what can I say? I was born a mile from here, and 95 years ago, and coming back to Dundee now is like landing on Mars, because there's nothing, of course some of the old stuff's still here, but it's just unbelievable. And when I look back on it all, I began to work, after having been at the Rocky, I ended up going down to Reading to Miles Aircraft, because I was absolutely over the moon about aeroplanes, and learned a lot about engineering and flying, of course, and that was really my first lucky break. I mean, I think I've been so lucky with the people I've met and where I've been at that given time. I was walking down Fleet Street and I bumped into 2 guys who, I don't know them from Adam, of all the millions of people in London, and my drawings fell on the pavement, and they picked them up and they said, "Oh, you're an artist." I said, "Well, I'm trying to be." And they said, "Well, come upstairs with us, we've got work for you." And I did. I just thought it was some kind of... Anyway, I went up there, and it was all about gymnastic equipment. So all the drawings had to be Superman, One was called, well, the one I did was Dick Hercules, and one was called Captain Vigor. And it was pretty daft, but they were quite, because you learn your trade, you either, you start doing anything, doesn't matter whether it's woodwork or engineering, you either get good at it or you give it up. And I just managed to make the grade with that. But Alastair has mentioned Jim Holdaway, and I can tell you that when I saw this guy just come out of the army, and we got stuff to do for the coronation at the time, and he was drawing the royal coach and all that, like Rembrandt, and I'm crawling about trying to get it right, This guy was just so accomplished. And it made me realise that really I was a sort of budding writer who could draw a little bit. And because when I was a wee boy, you've got a comic here, Hotspur, and on the cover is this drawing of a spaceship, and the title of the story was The Last Rocket to Venus. And the trick about the story, and the thing that really crunched with me, was the fact that, after all we know about the space race now, that the hub of the story was, and we're talking before the war, middle 30s, when the last rocket took the last of the population of Earth to Venus, because Earth was going to be smashed, somebody had to stay behind to press the button. It was like, it's the difference between somebody pointing at a light and saying, "Come on," and somebody going to a switch, and that really caught my imagination. And I have to say, I think that was one of the prime movers when it finally got some technical understanding of flying and all that kind of rocketry. And another bit of luck was the fact that as I began to draw the strip, they were trying to get to the moon. And so my strip was kind of keeping pace with what was happening in reality. And that, again, was incredibly fortunate, because it made something that wouldn't be immediately attractive to a wide audience. It would give them some focus on it. And Lady Luck was really smiling on me. And that's really the way it developed. I took the idea to the Express, and Lord Beaverbrook, who ran the Express, had a son, Max Aitken, and he'd been in the Battle of Britain. He was one of the boys. And when he saw the drawings I'd done of the aeroplanes, he took it on. He said, "We'll give it a try." And it ran for 20 years. And again, that was like, and all the time I was learning this, that, and the other. But I never had any idea that it would be, be remembered or as Alastair's done, archived and whatnot. So it's all very bewildering to me, but it's very gratifying. And I have to thank Al and the university and all the people who have helped me along the way. It's something, but there's something about Dundee that I hadn't really recognised until I came back this time. There's a wellspring, and it's not just because of D.C. Thompson or anything like that, because when I worked for Bill McHale on the little tower at the end of the Overgate, most of the guys that worked with me were people who had left the Courier because the Courier wouldn't let them sign their work, and they were trying to go it alone, So they were all there, and they were being very progressive, and I suppose nowadays we'd call them left wing. And the whole thing was an education to me. And so when I came to London, I was fairly well aware of what the situation was. But what's happened in Dundee now is extraordinary. It's kind of like the space age. I feel that, when I look around and see the waterfront and all this, the V&A, and then you go aboard the Endeavour, the Discovery, and you see what science had been like, and what had come from that, and how it affected the town. It really went to, again, on another thing that I note about Dundee is people are still wonderfully friendly and helpful for the most part. I don't know. It's really such a pleasure to come back. Looking back on it all, I think I was extremely lucky. And I'll just leave you with a little anecdote thing to give you an idea of this. One night I was working late for Bill McHale in the wee tower. And I went to Keeler's restaurant and to get a cup of tea and a pie. And I was sitting there and I was looking at something about the Sopwith Camel. Now, not all of you know what that is. It was a First World War Spitfire, you may say. And it had the engine rotated and drove the propeller, which meant that clouds of castor oil would come out, so that when the guys came back from a mission, they had to run to the loo because they were breathing in all this. Anyway, so it was a bit of a nippy sweetie, as I say in Dundee. Anyway, I was sitting there looking at this, and this old fellow, he's old, I say old deferentially because I was just a laddie, and he was sitting there, and he suddenly spoke up, and he said, "I used to fly one of these," and of course that roused my interest straight away, and we're talking away, and I'd noticed that one of his arms was hurt, it was slightly more, and he must have seen me just give it a glance, and he said, "Baron von Richthofen gave me that." Now, for a lot of you here, you probably don't know who he was, but he, as you know, he was one of the famous German aces. And I think he shot down about 80 people, which is rather not a great thing to be proud of. But the point was, out of all the thousands of people in Dundee, I'm sitting opposite one guy who I knew, when he didn't have to tell me, I knew exactly how he'd lived that period. And I mean, and why would I meet him? So I think Lady Luck's been over my shoulder pretty well. So this is a great evening for me, and I'll be going back down to London thinking that I'll get a wee bothy up in the Highlands and I'll be able to come to Dundee when I feel like it. Because you're all so warm and so progressive, it's just wonderful. I can't think of anything. I'll answer any questions, but I don't think I can say anything more. Except to thank Martin. Yes, I had my moment. Oh yes, people reminds me. I had my. This is last. Boring you there. When in 1959, I drew a strip was a rock, a big rock. The guys were on the moon, and they were walking about on the moon. And this has nothing to do with the story. I put a plaque, very playfully, I put a plaque on a rock in the foreground. And on the rock it had this pretentious message. It said, at this spot, Earth year 1969, August 2nd, the first living creature set foot on the moon. His name was Homo sapiens. And I'd forgotten about that. And of course, 10 years later, Duncan Lunam, your Scottish astronomer lad, wrote to the paper and said, didn't St. Jordan anticipate the thing within 10 days, 10 years ago, 2 days, 10 years ago? And they said, yeah, so of course the BBC got me in talking to Patrick Moore. I had a real old thing. And he was lovely, you know, he was one of, apart from all the business of the happenstance, it was great to meet him because he was so utterly unshowy, or he was just a marvellous guy. And the very first thing he said to me, he shook hands, and he said, I've just been looking at Jupiter, you know, and that red spot. And he was straight into a great long rigmarole, as if he'd known me all his life. You know, it was really funny. So that was my 15 minutes of fame with Patrick. And I actually met my wife through Patrick. It was rather strange. He used to ride round Selsey on a push bike with his cat in the basket, you know. If you looked at him, the last person to think he was a sort of high-grade astronomer. Anyway, I hope you enjoy looking at the drawings. I can't believe I actually did all that.
Sydney while he's here?
Yeah.
Any questions? Anyone?
I mean,
I've popped in for information already, so...
Sydney Brian Bollins wrote the introduction to
yes,
the
yes.
thing there.
Yes,
what was his involvement?
Well, he at one point, I was trying to do the Lancet Lane, and I got Brian to do a few strips at the end of what would be the last story from the Express. You see, the Express, they were feeling the pinch. Beaverbrook was very careful about offending folk, and he didn't like overt nudity or anything like that. But the guy who took the paper over was a pond king, really, and the paper got more and more, blousy as it went along, and so I could see that wasn't really the way I wanted to go. Although I have had ladies, of an attractive nature in the comics, but I didn't do them pointlessly. They had some kind of thing, and indeed, I had a lady astronaut on the moon whose initial medical examinations missed the fact that she was pregnant. So I had the idea of the first baby born on the moon, which probably will happen sometime. It was all very catch as catch can because they were only just on the moon. And that brought in some interest. But as I say, I was lucky to be living and drawing at a time when magical things were happening in the space race. So
Guess what I was going to say before you forget? Which ones are the most popular? Which ones that sell the most popular? Especially from America, they all want them to work with the ladies.
well, yes, the Americans are funny for all the prudery and all the nonsense and whatnot. They're fascinated by that. And you could draw like Michelangelo or one last anecdote. I did a drawing of the Mona Lisa, and I just had the eyes, and it's on the wall in their house, and that's the Hawke is on the moon, and this entity has taken over imaging something that he might recognize. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have one with me. Every person who goes down that stair and looks at that, except one young girl who was probably not much more than 15, so she wouldn't really know. Every one of the people stop and they look at those eyes and they say, that's the Mona Lisa. Now, if you want to think about being famous, I just think, that's fame, that that the Mona Lisa, this wee wifey from downtown Florida, the grocer's wife, is more famous than all the people in the world. That's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? That's the kind of thing, the little surprises that come up when you're doing that. And the last thing I'm going to say My granny worked in the jute mills, and she lived to 94, and she had a little, in what it was Balfour Street, and she was living in relative poverty, but I've got an oil painting that she had done of my grandfather. Now, I never commissioned, I've never been able to commission an oil painting. So, you know, you're constantly being faced by this extraordinary dilemma that Dundee presents with you. It's, you know, there's such a disparity at one side, and yet there's all of this marvellous, you like to laugh at her, but organised competence, you know. And I suppose in a funny kind of way, the mills were like that, only murderously awful places to work. And we went up to the Verdant thing and saw the machines going. And to think of people having to do that, and kids going under the machinery, it's a sort of a blight on the whole thing. But the engineering there is magical as well. So I'm quite proud to be a Dundonian, and I'm very happy and flattered, and I just want to thank you all for making the effort to put all this and come and see it.
Well, it's a huge honour for us to have you here, so it's been great to speak to you. So thank you so much for saying a few words. I think round of applause. Thank you so much.